Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight, we'll be continuing our journey through Confucius, the Analects. We are currently in Book 13, Chapter 10. That is where we will start this evening. We'll have one or two, or possibly even three readings. And then we will, from there, open it up for comments. We ask that you keep your comments brief into the text, and we promise to keep some time for afterwards for some deeper conversations. So with that, would anybody like to read numbers 10, 11, and 12 for this opening reading? I can offer, I guess. Okay. The master said, if there were any of the princes who would employ me, in the course of 12 months, I should have done something considerable. In 3 years, the government would be perfected. Number 11, the master said, if good men were to govern a country in succession for 100 years, they would be able to transform the violently bad and dispense with capital punishments. True indeed is this saying. Number 12, the master said, if a truly royal ruler were to arise, it would still require a generation, and then virtue would prevail. 13 as well. The master said.
No. 12's
okay.
it.
Okay, 12. Okay.
Okay. The reason we can read the 10, 11, and 12 is all related to the years, the time. Okay, so you will see. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I think 10 is about 3 years, 11 is about 100 years, and the 13 is 12 is about one generation, which is 30 years in Chinese tradition. So, oh, sorry. Okay, chapter 10. The master said, if any ruler were to employ me, the government would be improved within 1 year and perfected within 3 years. So first they talk about 12 months or 1 year. You will see the change, and then 3 years will have been perfected. Okay, so that's Confucius saying. So we'll compare to the other two. Okay, so the master said, if the government can be governed by good politicians, actually the word used is 善人, that means good people. But I think here, because Confucius used the good people for a few times, I think here, in Analects, Confucius means good people, means the good politician or the good administrator, okay, but not necessarily in the Confucian way, okay. So that means the good politician, but not good good Confucian. Okay, the way. So it's good, but not as good of he is doing. That's why he said, by good politician for 100 years, okay, cruelty will be overcome and the killing will be removed. These words are very true. Okay. So he's talking about if not doing in the Confucius way, and then doing in the regular good way, it's also good. But it needs a much longer time. We talk about 100 years. So chapter 12, the master said, even under the reign of a most regal king, it takes a generation for Ren to prevail. Okay, so here it talking about the king, the most regal king. That means the sage king. Sage king needs 30 years have Ren, okay, which some translation as humanity, to prevail. Okay, so I think if we read these three together, we probably can say Confucius asks people to be patient, okay, because it takes a while to do it. And the 10 is talking about his ambition, right? He think he can start to make change in 1 year, and 3 years you will see will become perfect, or he will reach his goal. And actually he did in his short, probably 5 years of employment by the Duke Dean of the state of Lu. Okay, he did have some achievement during 5 years. So that's all I have to say. And Amon.
Thank you, Jason. I like that you put these three together. Excuse me, because seeing the three of them together, there's a rhetorical device at work here that I think if you didn't isolate it in this way is easy to miss. We're all probably familiar with the expression of backhanded compliment. Here, I think we have the reverse of an underhanded boast. The progression goes from Confucius speaking about himself to then speaking about Zhenren to then speaking about sage kings. So in that sort of hierarchy, he's put himself as the lowest rung. He's not a good politician or a good man. He's certainly no sage or junsa. He's the lowest possible. And yet, in putting himself starting at that lowest tier, he also is boasting of his acumen for being in charge. I would improve things within a year and perfect them within 3 years. That sounds really antithetical to the Confucian value of humility, because being humble is something that Confucius has preached to us again and again and again. So to offset that, what we have then is a steady progression of, you could say, I could perfect things in 3 years, but I'm no great man or good person or Zhenren. They could in 100 years do this, and I'm no sage king, because a sage king within a generation. So it's taking away from that boasting, and it's like I said, it's a rhetorical device built into the text, in sort of the progression of the text, that's easy to miss if you don't pull it out in isolation like that. But it does beg the question in my mind, was Confucius good to his own decree to be humble, or did you get moments from the master where he was unabashedly willing to sort of sing his own praises and say, look, I could just fix this. I could fix this whole thing. That boisterousness seems very out of character for the Confucius we are learning about in the Analects. So to me, when I read something like that, it feels like it was either put in there much later by somebody singing his praises, or it could have been, this is actually a moment of how you see the master, what he could really be like with his guard down.
Thank you, Amon. Now we'll open it up for comments. If anybody would like to comment on any of these, 11, 12, or 13. Or 10, 11, 12. I'm sorry. I keep throwing 13 in there. Yeah, just pardon me. Does anybody want to speak about maybe the importance of virtue, and how much he's actually vesting in virtue in these passages, in the sense that he thinks that this is the cure-all for governance, per se. There is a certain arrogance about it, but even the idea that no more capital punishments would be needed, and let's just say no more punishments would be needed, or things along those lines, because it would transform the violent into, I guess, good citizens. And I think that that's in line with a virtue ethic, virtue philosophy, and with what he said in the past. But does anybody have any ideas how that would be executed at that particular moment in time and within that government? Good, or how Confucius feels it would be executed. Good, Amon.
Since nobody's got it, I will just reiterate something that I had mentioned at our last meetup about this notion of inflicting your psyche upon your populace. I really think Confucius hewed to this idea, that he hit upon it, that the person in charge's character just kind of emanates like a miasma through the entire kingdom. In his time, that probably may have been a little more true. Within a couple hundred years after we get to a united China, the sort of the norm would be to sequester the emperor away, hide them in the forbidden city, hide them behind the walls, don't have the populace sort of interact with them at all. And then it draws out the question, so then if they never see you and they're only hearing about you through your does that sort of radiance still occur? I think in the classical Chinese mindset, they say yes. But I think that those leaders were much more upfront and visible, and much more similar to a politician that we might have today, where the average person might actually see the duke, the king, the marquis at one point or another in their life. And that momentary glance and that momentary exposure was supposed to set an example so profound that it altered their expectation. If someone can be that great, I can be better than I am too. That was, at least to my way of thinking, how Confucius conceived of this in his time, in his place. Hundreds of years later, it would be enacted differently, but I think the conception, the sort of baseline presupposition still existed there.
Excellent. I mean, I agree with that. That this idea that somebody's behavior actually can inspire you to, to act better. And I think that this also speaks to another important point that we've seen throughout the Analects, is this idea of ritual and as to why doing it well. Like now, you're doing it well because it's maintaining a certain order. It's maintaining a set of values that are not just bigger than yourself. So the ritual itself isn't obviously something that makes someone better, but it's the idea that you're in working for, that something is the office that you hold is actually bigger than you are. And therefore that's why appropriate behavior is required. And I just think that that is in line with this idea. If you're behaving virtuously, then the society as a whole could actually benefit from these exemplars per se. We'll go to Ralph.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to comment on both of these aspects. As Amon said, the sequence of them is rather odd. That, well, I could perfect everything in 3 years. If we had a whole bunch of people, they could do it in 100 years, and a king could do it in a generation. Yeah, it's an odd as you say, it seems very boastful and presumptuous, and it's a slightly odd thing. So I think the idea that maybe this was put in later makes certain amount of sense, because the three of them, yeah, don't seem very Confucianist. On the other hand, it struck me that this idea that a leader could really have such a dramatic effect sort of is perhaps a much smaller and perhaps homogeneous group. I mean, he wasn't talking about China. He was talking about a particular dukedom or a particular small area. So, and I think if somebody were to say that today, it would make more sense to say it about, say, New York City than about the United States. I mean, about the idea that one person is going to perfect the United States, even in a generation, doesn't make much sense. But New York, if New York had a really virtuous, charismatic leader, but also presumably these provinces in China, whether it's Wu or Wei or Qin or Qi, presumably they're smaller, and they're probably pretty homogeneous. You don't really have much in the way of different religions or different ethnic groups. You've got a single hierarchy from the ruler to the administrators to the local people. So one good leader at the top, I suppose perhaps it's more like a corporation. Whereas in our sense, if you've got a strong, charismatic leader at the top of the corporation who can really inspire people, then they can really change things and turn things around. Thanks.
I'm going to interrupt here just briefly to read. Ali says he's having trouble with his audio, but he has a comment, and I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to hear it. He says, I don't really read number 10 as boasting or contrary to Confucian philosophies. I think you have to read the text, as Amon pointed out, together. The point is that the attainment of virtue is not a foregone conclusion. The upshot, I think, is that patience and perseverance is needed to attain virtue.
Yeah, thank you, Amon. And I also like to comment on both Adis and Ralph about chapter 10. Is that boastful? I think so, a little bit, but let's look at this way. It's a lot of complaining or reflect his personality, reflect the situation. It's typical situation. If you are not employed, then you will say, oh, if I got hired by Microsoft, then I will do this in 3 years. I will build a team to develop AI or something like this. So I was read this one more on his, because most of the Confucius career, he only been in, I think he only worked officially for 5 years, and the rest time he's unemployed. That's why we could talk about this. And then if you compare these three together, they are not talking about the same thing, right? The chapter 11 talking about the good politician, governed by good politician for 100 years, right? So this one is talking about a low. He only talking about remove killing and overcome the killing and the cruelty. Okay, so he talking about the minimal level, and the Confucius talk about 3 years he can perfect. Okay, he's not talking about the entire country. He's talking about just like Ralph talking about New York City, probably even smaller. Okay, smaller city, rural country, something like this. Arkansas. Okay, like Bill Clinton. Okay, the governor of Arkansas, but turn out, can govern the entire United States. And the last one, okay, need 30 years, a generation to have learned prevail. So here is the highest level, because you look at 12, you only remove the cruelty and the killing. That's just minimum result. Confucius' achievement only in the local area, or he just have to in his case is the state of Du. That's one of the small state. And the 12 actually is a big job. Okay. Here he used the word kin. That means the entire China. And he's not talking about remove killing. He's not talking about some successful thing. He talking about ren, which is the highest level. That means when you reach on the virtuous, the people are all virtuous. That's a very difficult job. You need one generation, even for a sage king. So that's how I read this 3 chapters. They are slightly different, in their intention and the goal.
So are there any other comments? I mean, Oscar asked the question, can somebody speak more of what it's meant by the removal of cruelty and killing? I think we covered that a little bit. The idea of the virtuous behavior somehow creates a more just society. A more just society has less violence and less, less need for the state cruelty as well, because he talks about capital punishment, as well as cruelty to others. So I think that it's almost talking about a utopian type of society. So there is a hint of arrogance, actually, that he thinks that can be achieved just by following his rules. But however, I do think that there is some substance to say that if people believe a society to be just, that there would be a lot less crime and violence. Does anybody else have any other thoughts on that?
Let me comment on this one. Joe, you talk about chapter 11. The word he used is, I just read the Chinese word, 盛残去杀. Okay, so I think you read as a capital punishment, but I read in a different way. I talked about the government, the cruelty, and the killing. Okay, I think, okay, because or the first one talk about the government cruelty, and the second one talking about the war. I'm not sure, that means capital punishment, because Confucius also execute people. Okay, I think during his short employee, they have his job is kind of chief police chief. Okay, in the capital city. Okay, so I think I'm not very sure, but he quickly execute a few people, and then to make sure the state is secure. So I'm not sure the capital punishment is in his mind. Okay, I think probably in the ancient people around the world, they all think of capital punishment are necessary. Okay, but here you're more talking about the government cruelty. That's just how I read it, but I don't see that means capital punishment.
Yeah, I actually want to echo what Jason is saying, is that what we think of as cruelty or capricious killing is actually kind of how I think of it. It may not be nearly the same. What was sort of standard fare, the degrees of punishment and what we think of as inhumane, probably the simplest version is Mao Tzu, who was a student of Confucius years later. Some think that his name, Mao, indicates a tattoo, which branding someone's face was a very common way of punishing them, that was not necessarily seen as cool or unusual, or the removal of limbs or castration, or the list goes on, and it gets really ugly throughout most of Chinese history. And so even in the killing of someone immediately, a swift and relatively painless execution, that would be considered less than cruel. And so when I read Confucius saying that in 100 years, cruelty would be overcome and killing would be removed, I'm not sure that he's saying from the sense of the state. I do think he means more from people murdering each other necessarily, bandits killing you on the side of the road. But the cruelty being removed means that if we kill you, at least it will be humanely done.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that. Does anybody else wish to comment? Okay, if not, we will move on then. To which combination would you like to do next, Jason?
13 and 14.
Sure. The master said, if a minister make his own conduct correct, what difficulty will he have in assisting in government? If he cannot rectify himself, what has he to do with rectifying others? Number 14. The disciple ran, returning from the court. The master said to him, how are you so late? He replied, we had government business. The master said, it must have been family affairs. If there had been government business, though I am not now in office, I should have been consulted about it.
Okay, I think these two I would consider is easy, right? So 13, okay, chapter 13, I think it's similar to chapter 6. Okay, so we will talk about this. Chapter 13, the master said, if one can rectify himself, or some translation will say, make yourself upright, okay, justly, okay. What difficult will he have in governing? If one cannot rectify himself, how can he rectify others? So here is similar to Amon talking about leading by example. All right, so you make yourself correct, okay, upright, that other people underneath you will be upright. If you cannot make yourself upright, then other people will not be upright. You cannot rectify other people. If we look at the chapter 6, it is very similar, right? The master said, if one's self is rectified without issuing an order, work can be done. If one's self is not rectified, even after issuing an order, work cannot be done. So in Confucius' mind, being a leader, the most important thing is you have to make sure you are correct, you are rectified, and you are upright. So other people will follow. That's Confucius' example. 14, chapter 14. 染指, okay, so here I talk about 染指 is 染有. Okay, so if you remember in the book 11, okay, Confucius said, tell his disciple, you can beat the drum and attack 染有 because he worked for the Ji family, the one of the powerful family in the state of Lu. Okay, so here's he described the situation. Ranzi returned from the court. The master said, why did you stay late? Okay. And Ranzi, he replied, I have business with the government. The master said, it must be business with the household of Ji. Okay. If it was business with the government, although I'm no longer in office, I will have heard about it. So this one shows the Confucius complaint about Lunyu or Lan spend too much time on the family, the Ji family's issue, not on the state issue. So another way to look at it is Confucius as the concept of if you work for the government, you should work for the government, not for work for the family, okay, the powerful family. That's Confucius' complaint to Lunyu. So that's it. I think these two are short. And Amon, you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think linking these two was absolutely a masterstroke and makes them both a little more clear. In the first passage in 13, he's telling people, rectifying yourself, correcting your own behavior, making yourself an upright person is absolutely integral to being able to correct anyone else, to steer anyone else, to govern in any kind of real quality way. And in the very next passage, he's talking about Ranyo or Ranji working for the G as the example of, if you hadn't rectified yourself already, you're going to be taken in by the corruption of those around you. And that's what's happening to you. So don't lie to me. I work here. I understand that they're using you towards their own ends and that you're not really doing the work of government. But what's really happening to you is that you haven't rectified yourself enough to have the integrity to stand up to that sort of moral backsliding that will be all too tempting with a family like this as your employer. You're going to need a stiffer spine to deal with sleazier characters. That's why these two link up, I think, so very well.
Thank you, Amon. Would anybody like to comment on number 13 or 14? Seems like we have a pretty quiet group this evening. Yes, I mean, I think one of the most important things about Confucius is the idea it's kind of looking inward to act out. Even we saw that even earlier, in the sense that if you were to behave a certain way as a government official, that the people would then follow. I think it's important to understand that your own personal integrity actually has an impact on society as a whole. And more importantly, though, it is something that, coming back to a Stoic principle, is something that you can control. So you can do your part, you can play your role in society. And I think that a lot of Confucian thought is about playing your role in society. So anyway, Jason, would you like to comment any further?
Yeah, just combine chapter 13 about the master said, if one can rectify himself and what difficulty will he have in governing, right? So just like before, Amon talking about, you set up as an example. So if you think about during the ancient time, there's no communication system, okay? So you have to govern or deal with relative large area. How are you going to do it, right? So I think there's a two way to do it. One is Confucius idea. You set up an example. I do it in this way in myself, then my family, which I talk about royal family, minister, the nobleman, they will follow the leader doing the same way. And the low-ranking officer will follow the minister doing the same way, and the people will do the same way. So everything will be in the good order. That's Confucius' idea. How do you, without the communication system, right? Right now we can have internet, we have the camera, we know something happened, we can issue an order from here, from Washington, D.C. and in California, we know something. So it's not possible during that time. So Confucius' idea is,
my mood can go from, yay, let me suck your dick, to I'm gonna kill you. This is so annoying. Fuck everybody.
okay.
Easy enough.
So good entertaining. So, okay, so that's one way to do it. Another way, just Amon also mentioned about the visible or invisible, right? So after the Qin dynasty, which is 221 BCE, that China became united. Actually, they are not doing the Confucius way. They are doing the other way, so-called the legalism system. In this way, the ruler cannot be example. He has to hide it, make it mystery, so people don't see it. Okay, and how do you control outside area? You will build the bureaucratic system, right? The hierarchy structure, the government, level by level. So you have the central government, they have a province, and then they have the county, everything in the one by one, in the direct order, the structure. That's another way to do it. Okay, so you can see the clear two different ways. One, to govern a big area, a relatively large area. One is set by example. One is by the system. But after 221 BCE, even China claimed, the ruler, the emperor, say they are Confucianism, they are Confucian, follow the Confucianism, but the government actually is follow the legalism idea. So use the bureaucratic system to control the entire state.
Thank you for that, Jason. Are there any other comments for either one of these? Anybody else wish to comment?
So if no comment, we probably can move to
Let's move to 15.
15. Yeah, just do a single chapter 15. There is a,
Sure.
Yeah.
Duke Ding asked whether there was a single sentence which could make a country prosperous. Confucius replied, "Such an effect cannot be expected from one sentence. There is a saying, however, which people have: to be a prince is difficult, to be a minister is not easy. If a ruler knows this, the difficulty of being a prince may there not be expected from this one sentence the prosperity of his country." The Duke then said, "Is there a single sentence which can ruin a country?" Confucius replied, "Such an effect as that cannot be expected from one sentence. There is, however, the saying which people have: I have no pleasure in being a prince, but only in that no one can offer any opposition to what I say. If a ruler's words be good, is it not also good that no one oppose them? But if they are not good, and no one opposes them, may there not be expected from this one sentence the ruin of his country." Wording on that was a little weird.
Thank you, Joe. And then sometimes the ancient Confucius say, sometimes it's too short, sometimes they repeat many times, and then unfortunately that we have to deal with that, and I call it that the Confucius way or Confucian logic of convincing people. Okay, let's do 15. It's a little bit long, but the essence or the key message may not be that long. Basically talking about some advice, some saying will revive a state or destroy a state. Okay, that's very simple. That's it. But unfortunately, put in the very lengthy way. Duke Ding of Lu. Okay, Duke Ding is the employer of Confucius. Okay, so in Analects, most of the time he deal with Duke. That's after Duke Ding. Okay, so Duke Ding asks, is there a saying that can revive a state? Confucius replied. Okay, just one small thing I'd like to mention. Okay, here I translate as a reply because most of the time we say Confucius said, right? The master said. But in Chinese, if you read the Chinese, it's the analect do it very carefully. If the student asks Confucius, okay, then Confucius will reply as the master said, 子曰, okay. But if the Lord okay, or the powerful minister who is Confucius' superior, asks question. Confucius will not, the analyst will not say the master said, okay, because in front of the superior people, Confucius is no more master. So always say, Confucius, Mr. Kong, reply. He doesn't say, he just reply. So here, Confucius reply. There's no such saying, but there is a close one, okay? People say, okay, that's the saying he's going to quote. It is hard to be a ruler. It is not easy to be a minister. If you knew the difficulty of being a ruler, would this saying not revive a state? So basic Confucius theory, Duke Ding, okay? If you know the difficulty of being a ruler, this only knowing this, it could, okay, revive a state or make a state prosperous, okay, be a good ruler. So Duke Ding keep asking, right? Is there a saying that can destroy a state? Confucius replied, there is no such saying, but there is a close one. People say, I do not enjoy being a ruler. I only enjoy people not disagreeing with my words. If your words are good and no one disagrees with you, that is fine. If your words are not good and no one disagrees with you, will this saying not destroy a state? So basically, he used this saying, these two sayings, to advise Duke Ding, the ruler. Okay, so first, you need to know ruling a country is a very difficult job. Second thing, if everybody agree with you, doesn't matter good or bad, that will destroy your state. So that's the short message for this long, relatively long chapter. So thank you, everyone. Amon, please.
I like this one. Imagine telling your boss that you don't really like the job of being the boss. You just like being able to boss people around. That's really what you're after. If you said that to your employer, most of us probably wouldn't retain our employment long. This could also explain a little bit why Confucius had a very hard time retaining a job. But this is one of those moments when he was employed or in the employ of Duke Ding. And what is it that the Duke is asking? He's looking for a magic bullet, a panacea, the thing that I can put on a billboard that will get this state turned around and functional and up and running. And Confucius tells him, yeah, it's not going to happen. There's no such thing. But here's something close, people say. And then he offers a piece of cryptology. It's hard to be a ruler. It's not easy to be a minister. If you knew the difficulty of being a ruler, would the saying not revive the state? He's offering something here saying, if you really appreciate what the job means, then wouldn't that be the thing that would make the revival of the state possible? I don't know that the Duke necessarily liked that response, but when he said, is there something that can wreck it? And he says, yeah, I don't enjoy being a ruler. I only enjoy people not disagreeing with me. That sounds like a not so veiled accusation. This is an interesting passage because it follows from the previous passages discussion on rectifying, correcting a state, perfecting a state, making it operational, making it work, making it under great leadership. And here's what he has to tell somebody who's a leader, which tells you that the Confucian ethic that is often perceived as top-down power, I say, you do, had a reciprocal component to it. Remonstrating to your superior was not outside of the Confucian ethic. In fact, it was very much a part of sort of the bravery that you were asked to have, the devotion to a proper way. You had to be able to look a person who could behead you in the eye and say, you're doing this wrong, in a fashion, in a manner that you hope landed so that they got the message and changed their ways. I'm thinking the message may have landed, but I'm not thinking it changed a lot of ways. It probably, in this instance, just changed employment status.
So I'll open it up for comments. I will say this, I was just at a meetup where we were talking about the difficulties of trade-offs in certain decisions and policies. So I'd be interested. I think the idea of leadership is incredibly difficult. It's easy to be a leader from our sofas, but it's not necessarily easier to be a leader. But anyway, I'd love to hear if anybody has any comments about this. Go ahead, David. Thank you.
Yeah, so this sounds like it's especially directed towards the leadership to understand that you should not only have the good of the state in mind, but you should not turn away advice without considering it, which may be hard for you to hear because you're so smart and clever and powerful and got where you are working so hard. But this could destroy everything. That's the one thing that could destroy everything if I had to sum it up. And so you better listen, right? Truth to power is part of our system. It's nice.
Excellent comment. And we should probably come back to that. So next up we have Rob.
Okay, thanks. This reminds me a little bit of the financial crisis of 2008. I read a lot of the discussions of what was going on internally. And the two banks that came through it the best were JP Morgan under Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs. And according to what I read was that they were characterized, they would listen to criticism. If somebody told them, look, we got a problem, they would listen. Whereas with Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, Citigroup, the others, those bosses did not want to hear any criticism. If somebody says, hey, everything's going great, we're making lots of money, I don't want to hear any criticism. And they were the ones that got destroyed by the crisis because they weren't ready for it. So the people who were listening to warnings, who were open to critical comments, survived, and those that didn't got killed. Thanks.
Excellent comments. I think this is one of the, one of the most important things as a leader is that you actually invite dissenting opinions. You don't necessarily squelch them because you constantly want to be testing your ideas and seeing what the alternatives possibly are. Amon, you can go ahead and speak. But
no, I was going to wait for you to be done. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, no, I look at this as almost like somebody like Karl Popper, the idea that you're continuously kind of trying to test your hypothesis, your idea. Now, granted, he was talking more about delineating between science and non-science and things along those lines, but the idea itself is that you're inviting dissent of sorts. And I think that that's really important whenever I see leaders that sometimes that don't have enough different voices in the room. I think it becomes a little bit worrisome because it's going to be very monolithic, both the message and the policy, and I don't necessarily think that that's helpful.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add that the other half of this formula, besides avoiding ruin, is how to make a country prosper. And Ali hit on this in the chat just after I put my hand up, but it's the appreciation of what leadership actually entails, being able to really see it more than just, I get to boss people around, understanding that, sort of the buck stops here. What are your responsibilities? What is it that you don't know that you need to know to be better at this? And are you going to seek it out? That is why those dissenting voices, that listening to criticism is so important, because it's your blind spots that are being revealed to you. And if you could appreciate, this job is more difficult than I have the sort of omnibus of knowledge to be able to do, you are more open to that. If you go into it thinking that you are, the king of the hill and absolutely nobody should, gainsay you at anything, well, you're setting the country up for disaster. So that appreciation for knowledge outside of your scope, outside of your purview, is the other half that Confucius is setting up here as the formula for a revived country. And this ties in with one of his key principles: self-reflection, self-knowledge, and obtaining, constantly building greater knowledge and wisdom is fundamental and key to good leadership. Oh, and Ali points out, and this, what Amon touched on about showing that the job is difficult, is the Confucian humility.
Okay. Again, I think that you hit on a very important point, the idea of wisdom. It's not necessarily gained by just yourself or living in a somewhat of an echo chamber. It's gained by actually taking in as many opinions as possible. I also liked what David had written a little bit about the Cuban Missile Crisis, where JFK actually invited a lot of dissenting opinions. It's there's just one of my favorite sayings is that there's just because you can diagnose a problem doesn't mean you have the solution. And I think in that particular instance, a lot of times generals can actually diagnose a problem, and that they didn't necessarily have the solution itself. So I think there's, and that's where dissenting opinion actually comes in. I'd also say that if you're the smartest person in the room, it probably isn't a really good sign. So if nobody's dissenting with you and they think everybody's listening to you, you ought to probably reconsider the people you're surrounding yourself with. With that, we can move on to, I know, Jason, you put them in the chat, 16, 17, and 18, although Oscar, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, one more.
Go right ahead.
Yes. So I had a question. In Confucius' time, how did the people protest? That's my first question. The second question, I wonder if the person in this leadership role is saying that it's difficult being a leader only because the people also in government oppose his leadership, which makes it even more difficult than just the citizens opposing it as well. So I wanted to ask both questions. Thank you.
I can tackle the protest one, though it's kind of a case set of one. They didn't, except when they did. And Confucius' time were a few hundred years before Liu Bang. But Liu Bang was the end of the Qin dynasty and the start of the Han dynasty, the longest extensive one. Jason actually pointed out earlier that after the Qin, you had a lot of people who claimed to be Confucius and really ruled with the methods of legalism. And that's very true. They kind of took all the three major schools of Chinese thought, legalism, Taoism, and Confucianism, and amalgamated them into something that they thought functioned, mostly leaning heavily on legalism. But at the end of the Qin dynasty with this unabashed legalism, where it was just a system of rewards and punishments and a hated emperor, because he was pretty universally hated. You got to kind of earn that when you're uniting all the warring states, and then your son turns out to be lackluster. There was a prison guard leading a bunch of coolie labor to work, and they missed their date, and they knew that the punishments meant everyone's going to get executed. That it was posted, it was said this was the punishment for getting stuck on a muddy road for a night too long. And so instead of going and meeting their punishment, they said, well, hell with this. How about I just take all these chains off you guys and you join my army? And that army became the army of Liu Bang, who eventually defeated the Qin and started an entire new empire. People didn't protest in the streets in a polite Confucian manner. There was no such thing as a polite protest by Confucians. People moved through their lives desperately just trying to subsist, and if it became untenable, you got wholesale sort of revolt and upheaval. And if you were right, because according to the mandate of heaven, if you were right, it had been removed from the people you just sacked and threw out of the empire, and it was handed to you, and you now had it as long as you maintained a good behavior. So yeah, that's about all the protest I can really point to in ancient Chinese history, is the usurpation of ruler or not.
Yeah, let me
Great question.
let-
Yeah,
let
great
me-
question and answer. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, let me add on about the protest question. Actually, the answer is no. Okay. Okay. There's a critical the critical time here during the Confucius time. The weapon usually is bronze, right? That's relatively expensive. So put this way, the common people has no weapon. Okay, there's another way, no power. So how about if I dissatisfied with my government? I think the only thing you can do is run away, go to another country. So I think here, I think we will read in the next few chapters, or we read last week, we talk about when Confucius in the state of Wei, right? Confucius say, that's a populous state. What does he mean? There's a lot of people here. That means people like it, okay? And then I think the next chapter, we are going to read about the state of Chu, another foreign country in the south. Okay, Confucius say what's the good minister? The result is people carrying their kids go to your state. Okay, so attract people or despair, or people come to you or people go away. That shows you are good government or not good government. So I think that's the only way we Chinese people during the Confucius time. But in the 200 years later, which is a warring state, which is different because they start to use iron. So iron is much cheaper. So the weapon become more available for people, but people still, the common people still don't have the power to revolt. But after the Qin dynasty, that's through the history of the 2,000 years Chinese history, people they have a two way to protest the government, right? One is just Amon mentioned, the mandate of heaven. Heaven will punish, okay, the government if they do not do good things, okay? Earthquake, a tornado, okay, typhoon, okay, flood, all this kind is the heaven, okay. Second thing is revolution. They don't have a peaceful protest, but they do have a revolution, like Liu Bang, okay, the Han dynasty. And in the first century, they also have a revolution, and almost every end of the dynasty, every dynasty end with revolution. So I think that's the two way to do it. And one last thing I'd like to mention is, that's in my opinion. When I read through the Confucius dialogue, and I think that a lot of people, include the Chinese or the Asian education, I think that they probably put it wrong. Okay, let's put it this way. I think they are wrong. Okay, because Confucius is talking to the people. He's not talking to you and me. He's talking to the government officer. So he said, listen to people's advice. He doesn't talk about listen to the common people. He talks about listen to your minister. Okay. He said be doing something, be devotion, be practice xiao and doing the ritual. He's not talking to the common people. He's talking to the government officer. Okay, you need to do this way. You need to be more. Okay. I think that's he's talking. Yeah, thank you.
Mark, you're up next.
Thanks, Joe. I had to step away, so I don't know if you talked about this at all. But I'm assuming that you're on 15, is that right? And did you talk at all about the way in which he seems to step back from suggesting that a single saying can cover cases, or a single saying can achieve a certain effect? There's this parallelism between the first and the second part, where the same thing is said. A saying cannot quite do that. I think I'm reading the loud translation now. And then at the end it says, this is not almost a case of saying leading the state to prosperity. So he's almost hedging. I don't know if, Jason, that you worked that into your translation, but it seems interesting that he's not trying to either unify all knowledge in a single saying or systematize it, perhaps. And maybe that's also an aspect of humility.
I will put this way. Okay, I don't see. Well, first, Confucius never tried to systematic build his philosophy. Okay, for sure. Okay, humility. I'm not sure he is being humble to do this one. I think what Confucius meant, he stepped back, not giving one word advice or one saying. I think he tried to say there's no quick solution. Okay, for this one, I think that's what he meant. Okay, and don't see like one thing will resolve something or one thing will destroy something, but I can give you some advice on that. That's what I read on this one.
Any other comments? I actually think that this is related to one of the previous ones where it does take time to change a state kind of thing, as opposed to having this silver bullet where one line can actually alter everything. So go ahead, Oscar. And then I want to get to, after you, I want to get to 16, 17, and 18.
Yes. So just using our government as an example, we have two parties. I would ask a question. I'm wondering if shared power is better than non-shared. Like, let's just say if the president was Republican, and so government, complete government, federal and state will also be Republican. Would that be best for the country? Would that rectify?
May I interrupt just for a moment? It's a little bit outside the text, perhaps, that we're getting right now. So we'll have time for comments, maybe about different types of government that actually are efficient or not. So why don't we just go right to 16, 17, 18, if you don't mind? Yeah, because I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to stay in the realm of the text anyway. And I see what you're saying, that the dissenting opinion is related. The idea of having shared power is important, but we'll have time for that when we come back a little bit later. So Shall we start? Does anybody else see Mark, you're back? Do you want to read your translation? I can read mine, whatever. Okay. The Duke of Shi asked about government. The master said, good government obtains when those who are near are made happy, and those who are far off are attracted. Number 17. Zi Xia, being governor of Zhoufu, asked about government. The master said, do not be desirous to have things done quickly. Do not look at small advantages. Desire to have things done quickly prevents their being done thoroughly. Looking at small advantages prevents great affairs from being accomplished. Number 18, the Duke of Shi informed Confucius, saying, among us here are those who may be styled upright in their conduct. If their father had stolen a sheep, they will bear witness to the fact. Confucius said, among us, in our part of the country, those who are upright are different from this. Sorry. The father conceals the misconduct of the son, and the son conceals the misconduct of the father. Uprightness is to be found in this.
Thank you, Joe. And then
No problem.
we'll do my translation. Okay, 16. Okay, that's a difficult. This word SHE. I think if you read some translation may translate as ye, Duke ye. Okay, but actually this word should pronounce it as sir. Okay, sir. But unfortunately will become SHE. Okay, so there's no other way to spell to pronounce the word sir in English. So this one actually, if I want to be picky, we should read as sir. Okay. So Duke Sir asked about governance. The master said, those nearby are happy. Those far away will come. Okay, just related to how to be the good governor, right? So the people will come to you. And if you are not good, people will run away. So that's the first thing. That's not only in the state, also in the city, right? If you are being in the mayor of the New York City, then you are not doing good job. The people, the New Yorker, will leave and go to a different city. If you're doing good, people move to New York City, something like this. So that's the way. But one thing interesting is so many disciples ask about governance. Okay, then Confucius has whole answer like you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to listen to advice, you have to devotion, okay, love people, many kind of answer. But this answer is a little bit different. You look at the Sir, the Duke Sir, actually he is not really a ruler. He is a minister of the state of Chu, and the Chu is in the southern part, which their lord, the ruler, considered as king. Okay, so during that time, the Duke Sir is a foreigner to Confucius. He is a foreigner. Okay, just like in America, some people from Mexico ask you about governance. Okay, so that's a foreigner on the south. So Confucius' answer is a little bit different. Instead of telling him what to do, he tells him what's the effect, what's the result of being a good about governance, right? He talked about the nearby, those nearby are happy. If the people within your state will be happy, but the people outside will try to come, okay, will go to your state. So that's the Confucius answer on that. And 18, you will see kind of similar situation. So, okay, and 17, 子夏, that's a Confucius disciple, serve as the minister of Jufu and ask about governance. Same question, right? About the governance. But Confucius answered, since he is the disciple and he is He's in the same country, not foreigner. So Confucius' answer is different. Don't seek quick result. Don't seek small profit. If you seek quick result, you won't be successful. If you seek small profit, you won't have great achievement. Okay. So this one, 欲速则不达, okay, become a common saying in today's Confucius, today's Chinese saying, okay, because usually the common saying, the best translation will be haste make waste, or don't run before you can walk. Okay, so that's the common saying in the today's Chinese language. Number 18, okay, same person, Duke Shi, right, told Confucius, there are upright men with us, I mean, in his country, state of Chu, okay, let's see as a foreign country, okay. One's father stole a sheep and he testified against him, okay. So that's his definition of upright. And you will see Confucius' answer very different. Confucius said, upright men are different with us. Okay. In my country, we call upright men different. Father cover up for their sons. Son cover up for their fathers. Uprightness lie within. So it sounds very strange. Okay, so that means, you know, Confucius, that's Confucius' way of looking at. He always, I will look at Confucius always see the family, the self. You have to the shell, the filial piety is more important than the justice. Okay, so in this way, if you, it's same kind of difficulty when you read Plato's Euthyphro, right? When Euthyphro, okay, said he know what's piety, right? He want to prosecute his father because his father killed for murdering a slave. Okay, okay, but so the dialogue changed to Socrates try to ask Euthyphro, what do you mean piety? So Socrates' concern is epistemology. Okay, how do you know, or what is the definition of piety? Confucius' concern is morality. Okay, so his view, the father cover up the son cover up the father. Okay, means the morality. Okay, his view, the family virtue probably more important than the whole societal justice. So that's Confucius' view. And later on, 200 years later, Mencius, okay, have the similar conversation with one of his disciples. Mencius' disciple asked him a question, right? The sage king, okay, Sun is the sage king being in Confucius' teaching as a sage king. So he said, sage king, okay, Sun, if his father commit murder, okay, what will he do, right? If you are the president, I think today we will see Joe Biden's situation, right? That his son has, you know, some problem, right? So Mencius' answer is that, oh, Sun will quit his job and run away with his father to enjoy the family. So that's Mencius' answer to that. So that means, you know, in today's situation, Joe Biden should quit his job and then bring his son, run away to a foreign country and enjoy the happy family life. And that's probably the answer from the Mencius on this one. So that's interesting, and we probably, you know, I know it will be very controversial, but that's what Confucius teaches. And then, Amon, you might have a different opinion on this.
No, I could see your argument from these passages, and I don't think it's incommensurate with what he's saying. The only thing I want to point out about these three passages together is that they work together because the orientation has shifted. Now it's outcome focused. In passage 16, 17, and 18, what he's talking about is the result or the outcome, as opposed to a explicit discussion on the internal character. Internal character is still there, but it's more inferred than it is front and center. What's front and center here is these are the outcomes, or these are not the outcomes. But this is sort of evidence of his theory that he's presenting.
Thank you for that, Amon. David.
Yeah, I'm a little unsettled at this moment in the discussion because here's another way to read it, and you can blame me for dreaming up in a sort of Talmudic way what isn't being said here that seems to me to be lying here. And I'm seeing this as a contrast of legalistic. Look at how upright these people are. One group is pointing out, well, he testified against his father in court. They are so righteous. He'll do that. And Confucius goes way further, as Amon was pointing out, to results and say, you know, suppose the father, in the case of the stolen sheep, took one of his sheep and secretly put it back in the other guy's, farm and covered up for his son and just told him on the side, and there was never a legal case to embarrass the son and the family, and corrected him in a filial way. So covering it up and preserving that respect and, and solving the problem, I don't see that as missing here. Could that be a way to look at this? That, yeah, the higher value, even than testifying to get justice done, is to, take care of the justice, but fix the family problem if you can, respect, maintain the health of the family, the whole system. Don't be legalistic, be Confucian. Is that a valid way to read this?
That's an interesting question. Go ahead, Jason.
I certainly think it could be. I think that there is definitely some rhetorical value in that reading that other Confucianists saw.
Well, I will put it this way. Okay, if you compare to Plato's dialogue, right? I don't know how many times when they talk about virtue, Plato will talk about justice, right? Justice is probably the highest thing, but in Confucius, it's just different. Harmony, okay, is the most important, right? The harmony is the highest goal. So if you can see, okay, if your father commits some crime, you test against him, you cause the problem in the family, right? So it turns out you reach the justice, but the harmony, okay, the society is not harmonic because the family has a problem. So the ideal way would be just like soon, okay, the mentioned solution, right? You quit your official job or you do something just like, to cover up. Cover up doesn't mean you just help your father commit a crime. You just try to relieve, okay, do something, quit your job, bring him away, something like this. They will make the society more harmonic. I think that's their concern. I'm not trying to say who is right, who is wrong, who is better, who is worse, but that's Confucius' focus on.
Go ahead, Mark.
Is concealed, and the justice is not brought up, right at that point.
In my reading, I don't see that the justice in Confucius' time. I don't see the word justice, and I even don't see the ancient word. What's the ancient word for justice?
That's interesting.
I think Yuli has.
Yeah, Mark. Yeah, okay. Let's go to Mark, because I'm trying to think of times when throughout Confucius where justice might be actually something that has. But you're right about social harmony.
Yeah,
Mark.
I think I really cannot think about what somebody can help me. What's the justice? Okay, there is a justice during the today we have a just Chinese word have a justice, but it's later time. But during the ancient time, I don't see the word similar to just upright. Okay, and sometimes use the 仁义 as a justice. That means the 仁 and the righteousness. So same as the Greek words, I think it's daiki, D-I-K-E, daiki, as a justice, or sometimes translated as upright. Okay, so the justice is at least is a different kind of concept, you know, compared to today's we talk about justice.
So before we go to Mark, we'll go to Yulia first.
Hi.
Forgive me.
No, that's okay. This is a question I've had for some time. And it's about the extent to which Confucius carries this analogy between how a father has to, how a son has to behave towards his father and how a citizen has to behave towards the ruler. So here, I think, is it maybe a point where those differ because he is previously talking about how we need to remonstrate with our rulers. And now he's saying, but when it comes to a son and his father, then a son must protect his father, you know, over and above what his father might be doing to other people, like fellow citizens. Is this kind of where the analogy no longer holds, or is there an aspect to it I'm not seeing? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yulia. That's a good question on this. I read this one. The Chinese word here use in. The word called in means hide. Okay, hide doesn't mean help him doing the bad thing. Okay, commit a crime. It also the best way is you still need to advise your father. That's wrong thing. You shall not do it. But you don't testify against him, okay, because you will violate or break, destroy the social order. Okay, the idea would be you tell your father, no, you know, don't steal it. It's not the right thing, but you know, try to cover up, probably pay back the money, try to settle with the your neighbor if you store the sheep. Okay, if you haven't killed the sheep, return the sheep. Okay, and if you already killed, pay some money and bring him away, and then you have to advise your father, no, that's not do it. You know, that's run away. You know, don't stay here because people criticize you. Something like this. That's I think that's Confucius mean. You know, so in this way, there's no conflict between advise your ruler and cover up for your ruler. And Confucius really practiced this way. He wrote a commentary, so-called Spring and Autumn, 春秋. Basically, he is writing or commenting on state rules history. And he talking about for the person is a worthy person, you should cover up, okay, something, the bad thing for him. And then you, if the person are superior, you should cover up. So this word cover up, or you call conceal, okay, is very important in Confucius teaching. Okay, not only in the family, you have to cover. When you write history, which will become very biased, right, in today's view. But in Confucius' way of writing history, you need to cover up, okay, the good people's behavior. For example, you write the history of the Civil War, you will talk about Lincoln. And Lincoln is a great person. You should always talk about his good behavior. And if he had some, I don't know, if he had some bad thing, or not, you should cover up. Okay, you should not say, oh, he also did this bad thing. He's a womanizer, something like this. So one example would be Oppenheimer, right? There's a movie, okay, depict Oppenheimer. If you want to say Oppenheimer is a good person, you should always talk about good thing about him. You should not talk about he's a womanizer, he's about doing this. I think that's Confucius' view of cover up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks. I was wondering about this discussion of how, Jason, you were saying his Xiao, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but filial piety and the respect of the children for the parent, in a sense, is more important than justice, because justice doesn't really make an appearance here per se. But I was wondering how this intersects with the great learning and the stages of the great learning. I think it's stages 6 to 7 of the 8 stages, and how that if the family is in order, then the state will be ordered. So somehow there can't really be a conflict here. It's got to be, it's not as if, or I'm wondering if justice, our sense of justice, is at odds with the filial piety, or they're somehow connected through the great learning.
Well, you're starting with the idea that justice exists. So the idea, that Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking more about social harmony. So when you say justice, you're assuming the presence of something that may not actually exist within Confucianism as we know it. I don't know. Jason?
Yeah, that's a good comment on this one. And then it sounds like out of this, outside of this text, but actually it's tightly related. Okay, because Mark mentioned about the 8 stages, right? So basically in the Great Learning, which was written by the Confucius' grandson, okay, who you can think about 100 years later, okay, Confucius' grandson wrote the Great Learning on this one. He's talking about it. To me, it's totally matched with this text. Okay, again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I just say it's matched with this text. The Great Learning talk about you have to rectify yourself, categorize yourself, right? Then you have to 齐家, that means harmonize your family, right? Then you can govern the state. Then you can pacify the entire world, okay? And during that time, entire world under the heaven means China. So you can do this one. So he doesn't call, okay, justice. He called pacify the world. So that means the entire country is peaceful. So stage by stage. So think about the situation. If I'm an ambitious guy, I want to pacify the world, and then my father stole the sheep from the neighbor. So I testify against him. So turn out I don't harmonize my family. Okay, I failed under this stage because I rectified myself, and I cannot harmonize my family because I test against my father. So I have no way to move on. I cannot become a governor to govern the state. I cannot pacify the world. So I failed here. So what I have to do? I have to cover up for my father. So harmonize my family will become harmonize my family. Then I can move on. So I think that would be Confucius' teaching on this one. Again, I'm not saying I agree with this one, but that's Confucius' teaching.
Amon.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of address what Mark asked and what Yulia was talking about. The violation here is not so much one against another, in the sense of justice being served or not. The violation is a son testifying. Note, the quote is, one's father stole a sheep and he testified against him. That's what he did wrong. Not the father's stealing of a sheep necessarily, but the son's advocacy to bring down his father. That sort of lack of shao or filial piety is what is in question here, and what Confucius is addressing, that, if a father stole a sheep in our land, you cover for him. You do something more, you do not make that sacrosanct violation of the father-son relationship. And that actually ties to what Yulia was asking about the citizen's responsibility towards their ruler. You don't violate that. You don't betray your ruler. Even if they're in the wrong per se, it is still incumbent on you to be filial to them. And I think that also kind of addresses this idea of, sort of the vague concept of justice, which again is not brought up here. But what is just in Confucius' mind is one's loyalty to who you are obliged to be loyal to. Your father, a father to the son, those sort of reciprocic relationships that he lays out and are inviolable. And what this man is pointing out to him as a demonstration of someone's uprightness is a violation of those, paramount values.
Thank you for that. And that actually answers Oscar's question as well, who also asked a question in the chat about loyalty. So very much appreciate that, Amon. Kevin and Mark, and then Jason, do you want to make another try to do another one, or no? Okay, we're done.
So we have Kevin, Mark, and Yuli.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, my turn.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Nice
thank you. The first, I want to follow that story, the father and the son. Even filial piety is so important in the, I would say, Eastern culture. However, they say something if my parents or grandparents are doing something, it's not a normal way. We need to consider as wrongdoing or something need consideration. However, this story, if we go deeper, how about this father is for family, right? For family survival. This basic need. If you think about Maslow hierarchy, right? So as that chart, a human being is still needed physiological part, food, water. That's the basic needs. If we cannot survive, you're going to upper level. It looks good. It looks political correct. It's possible not practical. That's one story. Another side, even abstract this example. We talk about justice. Who talked most justice? Rich people, advanced country, and you from poor people. You don't have a job. I don't have clean water. I don't have a shelter. My clothing, shoe. So this basic need not satisfied yet. What's the justice? So justice is applied to obviously advanced country and ruler, wealthy people. Makes sense. Those, if you apply justice, it's expensive rule and game. You think about it, how much you hire a lawyer to do a liability check or make the model or maintain a law. It's overhead. It's big. That's my bias. Thank you.
There's a great dialogue in Socrates with justice is for the stronger. I won't go into it because it's a little bit off topic, but it kind of speaks to what you were saying, Kevin.
Yeah,
Mark.
thank you. Yeah, agree.
I was just wondering that there can be limits to filial piety. because if the father is the ruler from passage 15, and the son is seeing that the ruler is doing something that is not good, and he doesn't speak up, I think it's appropriate for the son to speak and to counsel the father. I seem to remember some passage in Confucius where it says that the son can gently sort of criticize the father, but not keep going with it.
Yeah, I think that's yeah.
Yeah, the limits.
Yeah, two friends, okay, and you have advice, and then if he doesn't listen, then you should not continue. To the parents, he talked about, I think in the early book 2 or something. He talked about, if you, I try to think about the Chinese word here. He talked about you have to advise in the right way. Okay, I think that's very important to Confucius. You should, when you advise, he never reject, okay, as a son, to advise against your father's behavior or your ruler. He never reject this idea. You always have to do it, but you need to do it in a certain way. Okay, you need to be I need to find out the exact word, but basically you need to be careful doing that way. Cannot just like in today's Congress, you just direct point out the president did something wrong, terrible, ridiculous. You don't do this. You have to guide him. Okay. Oh, and one question, one comment to respond to Mark about, is there limited on the filial piety? Okay, so I think that's the foundation. I'm not sure they have the limit or not, but that's the foundation. That's, if we go back to the great learning, that's the foundation, right? If you want to move forward, you have to make sure your family is your family is harmonious, because that's very important. Just like all the president election, you have to bring your wife, your kids, your grandkids, and show you are a happy family. Okay, so I think that's the Confucius way of thinking.
What are Yulia next, and then we'll go to Kevin.
It's Yulia.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. No, it's okay. So my question is about Ran Kui or Ranchi? Rankui?
Yeah.
So he is, so basically, as Jason and Amon, you were saying that, yes, this filial piety does extend to the ruler. It does extend to the loyalty that the citizen owes to the ruler. And the citizen must cover up bad deeds of the ruler, or rather, the minister must cover up the bad deeds of the ruler. And, no matter what the ruler does, Aman, you were saying that, you owe your loyalty to him, and that's really on you as a citizen. But Confucius is also really, really critical of Ran Kui for supporting and helping the Jinsen family stay in power, because he sees them as very corrupt. It seems like Ran Kui is in an impossible situation in terms of Confucian philosophy. He is supposed to have this filial piety and this loyalty towards the corrupt ruler. At the same time, whenever he carries out their orders, Confucius is so critical of him. I'm just wondering what you guys think about that thing.
I'm going to try and tackle this, and I think that the stolen sheep is actually a really good metaphor, in the sense that putting aside Kevin's considerations of perhaps stealing this for your base needs is a necessity. What you have in Ranshu or Ranzi is his service to a family who are sheep thieves at a grand scale and unremitted about it and incapable of receiving the correction that even a loyal son should be able to provide them. Knowing this, the proper course for him is actually don't take the job. You cannot correct this family. That there isn't a route for you to do this. I understand why you did it, because they are the ruling family and you do believe that you can turn this Titanic around, but it's not possible. And you should have the fortitude to see the impossibility of it. If not beforehand, then certainly once you've been in the mire of it. And there's also a caveat here, which is the G family that he is serving are nobility, but they are not the nobility. They are not the emperor. There isn't actually an emperor, but they are not the high king that his loyalty is owed to primarily. And that person should be overseeing and considering the good fortune of all, not stealing their sheep. And so, although these seem paradoxical, and it is, I will absolutely grant you, a situation that Ron is in that is untenable for somebody. I've got a good job here and I could do some good here. You can't do any good there. That monster will never not be a monster. It's not insolvable. It's not without any solution. It's just not a solution he actually desires, which is you've got to give up the ministry. You got to give up the job. You should be destitute and poor in a nation that is without the way. That is an honorable thing, according to Confucius. But yeah, I think that you hit on something very, very poignant there.
Yeah, I agree with Amon. That's the situation. But Confucius always compare the father and the son, ruler and the minister. But remember, their relationships are not identical, right? If your father did something wrong, you cannot quit, divorce your father. But your ruler or the chief, like a G family, your boss, the people hire you, you can always quit the job or you don't work for him, right? So you have a choice. And Confucius always said that in the good time or in a good ruler, you are not working for them. It's shameful. If it's a corrupt tyranny, you still work for the government. It's also shameful. So you have a choice at this one to work or not work or not to work, right? But for father, you cannot be a son or not to be a son. You have no choice. So that here's some difference here.
Kevin.
Yeah, I follow Edison, always from his educator, I guess, from a post Harvard is in Asia. The students generally respect so much on the teachers or professor. That's just one example. Obviously, kind of close to you think about a filial piety, and from top-down relationship, and the one word for the ruler or officer in public sector, accountability. That's something we live in Western. That's the big. We can select a leader. However, what a leader doing, we lack control. That's after 4 years, you have to make a decision, maybe you repeat the same cycle. And that's one angle. A second one, even bigger, is the culture is so connected. It's a closed loop. For example, for we use we used I, right? That's self-actualization. That's the top. However, in the traditional, at least I live, about 30 years in China, mainland of China. If you 18, normally we consider parents' advice for career, for growing. That's the first choice. And up to date now, I talk to my, obviously different Indian family. They still, if I recently one colleague, he said if he's in Canada, but he said if he going to look for a girl, even free love has to be ask his parents' approval. That's in China used to be like that too. Even now, see the parents first. If they say no, it could be that's if in Western we cannot understand this. As a general, if from elderly mindset, I think that's if they pass the parents, eyes, they think okay, like pretty good family, and the union family. That's another story, and I'm going to the last point. Normally, we call it 4 generation under one roof. That's used to be so great. You can elderly, grandchild, they live together, learn from the elderly wisdom, young people how to respect the elderly, and elderly how to count for their behavior too. Yes, that. I'm gonna pause here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. It's good to hear your voice as always. Amon.
I'm gonna have to take off shortly, but I wanted to take something Kevin said. It struck a memory chord, and I want to steer back to something Oscar was driving at before about divided government and what Kevin just said about accountability. That is actually a very important aspect of Confucianism that was easily run roughshod over by the powers that be. This notion of remonstrating, of being able to gently correct even those in a position superior to yourself, was fundamental to Confucius' ideas, and it was the least desirable aspect of Confucianism to those who were in a position of power. China, hence, has been a one-party rule state for most of its existence. There hasn't been anything approximating divided government, really, except at times of, some one civil war or another, or one rebellion or another. And that sort of division has how we have a system built to offer in checks and balances. The system that Confucius proffered was supposed to have that as a feature, but it has proven to be too easy to push that down into sort of the waste bin of memory, or as an absolute aside, when compared to the propensity for any bureaucracy or any system of power to always hew to a first priority to perpetuate its own power, its own position. So strengths and weaknesses. However, one thing you can definitely say about the strength of unilateral power is longevity, because China was the longest contiguous empire on the planet for ever. And still there has not been a longer contiguous empire, even as it shifted hands dynasty to dynasty.
Thank you very much, Amon. And if you should have happened to leave, thank you as always. It's always an honor to have you here. Jason.
Yeah, I also need to leave in a few minutes, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joe, and hosting, and I believe Oscar want to discuss about the shared power, like divide government, or this one, and then just a quick answer on that. And the Confucius, Amon also answered this one. Confucius never believed a shared power or divided government or check and balance being considered as a bad thing because it's not harmonious. So, and I think the basic through the Chinese history, the divided government or check and balance and the partition always considered bad till today. So thank you everyone, and then I think we are in a good. We are finished to 19, right? And then we have 11 chapter to go for next week, and I think that I look at that they all very short. So I'm very sure we will finish next week on the book 13. Yeah, thank you everyone.
Do you think we'll get the